Hello and welcome back to my channel. I have already posted just a few videos about episodes 1 and 2, and those videos don't necessarily focus on a play-by-play of what occurred during the episode, but just touches upon different issues. And so that's what my video commentary will be about. And as you can see, I'm using a cartoon, and I mentioned in other videos that I got that idea from another vlogger on YouTube to just turn on a cartoon instead of using raw footage. So let's get into the topic that keeps coming up since this series started, and that is the whole issue of colorism and identity. And this is such a hot issue among so many Black people, particularly in the United States, about how other Black people are defining themselves. And so there's all of this conversation online about how other people choose to define themselves or how other people choose not to define themselves. And here's the thing, you don't get to define how other people are defining who they are. And I think the issue often has to do with how you look. If you look a certain way that may not be the stereotypical expectation of someone in your race, suddenly the conversation becomes, what do you identify as? How do you feel about not looking like whatever the stereotypical appearance is for your own racial category? And that always becomes a conversation that people who may not look like whatever people expect someone with their racial category to look like, that always becomes questions that they have to answer. And it really is kind of ludicrous, because they don't have to defend how they identify. They don't have to clarify it for anybody as they go out in the world. And the other issue that has come up related to Katie already in this season has to do with the fact that Katie has one parent who is not Black and another parent who is Black, and has identified herself as biracial, which would be accurate for her background. But somehow there are so many ignorant Black people out there who somehow have decided that if you look like one racial group, that means somehow you should be denouncing, dismissing, diminishing, not mentioning your other parent's background, when that's just as much a part of you as your other parent. So regardless of how you may look, you are still just as much one parent's child as the other parent's child, and your background is equally significant, or it should be at least, because both of your parents are part of your history, part of your ancestry. So your hair texture, how deeply colored brown your skin may be, that has nothing to do with the fact that you are the product of a mother and a father equally. And I'm not sure why that has to be explained to so many people when it comes to people who are biracial, or even people who are not biracial. I think that there are also many people who are Black and non-Black who have no idea of the difference of a racial classification and an ethnic classification. And I think that the expectation is that people are supposed to primarily identify by their racial classification in the US. Or maybe that same expectation exists in other countries, but I do notice it very much in the US. And particularly in Black spaces, where other Black people expect that when they encounter another Black person, that person is supposed to primarily define themselves by a racial classification and not an ethnic classification. And that is another thing that is completely up to the person. And choosing to primarily identify by an ethnic classification certainly doesn't mean diminishing, avoiding, dismissing a racial classification. It is simply an individual choice. And so I think it's good that maybe this whole conversation once again is surfacing in social media about how other people choose to define themselves. Katie's children obviously have one biracial mother and one other parent who is Jewish and Semitic, whatever you may want to, whatever label you may want to put on Katie's ex-husband. But those children have every right to decide how they're going to define themselves as they get older. And it may change. They may have one self-definition as teenagers and get to college and begin studying other groups and what have you, and decide that they want to change how they're going to define themselves. And then as an adult, once they're out of college and they've matured, they may also decide that they want to define themselves even differently again. And so there's nothing wrong with changing your definition of self as you go through life. But I think that in some Black spaces, many Black spaces, you will be ridiculed and scoffed at for deciding to evolve in terms of your own definition of self. So I think one rule to always remember is that it is up to the person of how they choose to define themselves. And if they want to define themselves primarily by a racial categorization, that's fine. If they want to primarily define themselves by an ethnic categorization, that too is fine. And so I think we have to stop just deciding that how someone looks has to become their primary definition for themselves. And I know someone is going to make the argument, well, regardless of how you choose to define yourself, society will see you as X, Y, and Z, or society will see you as this. That really doesn't mean that you then have to define yourself according to how other people see you. That's completely ignorant to tell somebody that because society sees you as this, therefore you need to change your own choices in your self-definition to match other people's perceptions of you. I think that's completely ignorant, but yet that argument completely comes up in many conversations online and offline when it comes to how other people are choosing to define themselves. So comment put some comments in the comment section and talk about, what do you think about these conversations about self-definition? Do you feel that it is completely up to the individual to decide how they will define themselves and whether they want to use a racial classification as their primary way of defining themselves, or whether they choose to use their ethnic categorization as their primary way of defining themselves, or something else? Please comment on that. And do you feel that other people in your race get to discuss how you define yourself and try to impose their rules about self-definition onto you? So put that comment, reactions about that in the comment section. Thank you for watching this video, and keep checking this channel, and I'll keep making more videos for you.